Well, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. A little choppy start on my part, but hey, good afternoon. Welcome once again. Welcome once again. Today is Thursday, and you're here with me. You're here with me on Crossroads Navigating Business Challenges. It seems that I may have a little bit of delay in my feed here, but I think we should be able to function well. Now, the last podcast that was aired, we looked at a very, very, very important subject matter, and that had to do with the whole aspect of family-owned businesses, some of the challenges that we face in operating such an entity type. And we were fortunate enough to have our guest at that time, our guest, Mr. Seth Spurlock. And we had a very, very, very interesting conversation. Since that time, we have had, some feedback, some comments on the whole issue because, of course, when it comes to small businesses, we find that a lot of those types are either fully family owned or to a large extent they are family owned and operated to a large extent. One of the things that came out of that discussion was the whole issue of succession planning. We did not go into a lot of depth there, but it was mentioned and it was recognized as being one of the very salient points to consider, to ponder, you see, and to include in the whole structuring of our small family owned and operated business. What I intend to do this evening, because I found that there were some gem moments. As a matter of fact, the present, the airing was gem filled, but I thought that there were some aspects and some mentions that are worthwhile revisiting. And so, what I'm going to do this evening is just to share with you some excerpts, some clips of the discussion that took place on that podcast. And I will end it all with spending some amount of time looking in a little more depth at the whole aspect of succession planning. Succession planning. All right. So I'll jump right in now to kind of revisit some of those topics that were mentioned in our discussions, and then at the end of the process, we will look in a little more depth at succession planning. So take a listen.
That definitely it can be a conflict as you go along, and it depends. I mean, I have my own experience, and everybody probably has a different way of going about it, whether they're multi-generational or first generation, like in our case. But I've been involved as a president of a company for over 30 years, and my oldest child is, a little over 30. So, that's all they've known is that's what I have done. And some of them grew up when the company is just privately owned now. And so they've been part of that along the way. And I think there are sometimes the natural conflicts that come into it. And sometimes it's expectations on my part of my own children, and I try to set them up for that. And I'll just go down a couple of these little tangents because there's so many areas to talk about this. But you prompted me to think about my own children being in the business, and all of them. I have four children, and two girls, two boys, and they've all worked in the company at different times, different tasks along the way, depending on where we were and their particular interests. None of them work in the business right now, which is kind of interesting as well. And I'm thinking and more about this in a little bit is that that will change over time because they're out there doing their own thing and following their own vision for their life. But I think that as part of doing that, they may see that maybe there's some merits of
Okay,
having a family
let me
business
just
and
pause here just for a while.
now.
Now, I'm having some feedback here. Not sure why. Mm. Now, family-owned businesses quite construction evolved out of no plan. So dad, family member will start this operation. And before you know it, the children are involved, other family members become involved, and what was maybe just a sole proprietorship end up being a family operation. Now, when it happens like this, it certainly means that there would have been no pre-planning as to how this structure ought to be positioned. It evolved over time, evolved over time. And so what my guest was pointing out right now is that, his children came about, they became involved in the business, other family members became involved in the business. But as time went on, you may find that all these family members are not necessarily interested in continuing in the business. So almost like by default, they became part of this operation. But then as time goes by and the children grow up, sometimes they decide, okay, this is not quite for me. And so that in itself will introduce some level of challenge or of challenges that could not have been prepared for or pre-planned for. So as we go through more of these clips, you'll realize that in such a structure, there's always going to be things that come about that would not necessarily have been a part of a structured plan of action. And that's one of the uniqueness of family operated businesses. Let's continue to listen to our
what that
guests.
provides for them. But as far as like setting expectations and where it can go positive or negative, I mean, I would use this as a time when my children were younger, and I would say even still today is before we have a company event that involves employees or our customers or in industry, and they've been involved in all of those type of functions. We typically talk about, okay, who's coming, what are we trying to do there. We have certain guidelines and boundaries around personal habits and things we're going to do. It may even be as so direct as between my wife and I to say, that would not be an appropriate thing to wear, this would be a better thing to say, these are the things we don't discuss. And so we do all that. Sometimes I do it in writing if I'm not, going to see my children to the event. Sometimes I, have a short conversation with them ahead of time. And then they even would have what we maybe call it a post-mortem or whatever you want to say is, these are things that went really well. These are things we could improve on because it's the perception and the of community leaders or industry or customers or employees as to who are these people and how does our family interact and do they want to be part of that, or is there conflict and compromise and inappropriateness. And so you're right. If it goes well, David, it can be a beautiful and wonderful thing, and you get all these nice comments. Oh, your children are this and that. And when you don't get them, you always wonder what happened, and sometimes, and so it's pressure. And I tell them, this is not a party. This is an entertainment event for us to build relationships with our customers. And it's not just customers. I mean, we sometimes we have industry uh, or regulators there, or maybe a local state representative or whoever it might be. I mean, they attend industry functions. You mentioned some of those industry functions like the Georgia Mining Association, where my family will be there, and we'll meet with the governor. And
I'll pause right now. A very important point that is made, and I hope you'll bear with me because whenever I'm speaking, I'm having a feedback, but we'll work with it. Usually, family-owned businesses evolve out of the family structure. So you find that the values, the beliefs, the behaviors, what the family holds dear, what the family respects are usually extended into the business structure. So with that said, a family owned and operated business tend to reflect the very fabric of the family, what they believe in, okay, what are their principles, what are their guiding light as they go through life. And so you find that the way it is structured, the relationship with clients, the relationship with each other as workers and family members all take on a texture and a tone that is reflective of the values of the family unit. Now, one may argue, is that good or bad? Because outside of a family-based business, the typical business will come about by men, individuals coming together and deciding what is the best thing for us to do, deciding how best can we structure this business to run as a business should run. And so the things that are discussed, the decisions that are made up front tend to be so much different from when the business just naturally evolves from the family structure. Because it is clear that some of the activities and some of the ways and modes of operations would not necessarily have found themselves in an what I call arm's length business where independent, unconnected individuals come together and say, let us establish a business. Okay, certain things, certain behaviors, certain activities would not be part of that structure to begin with. However, as I said earlier, because of the fact that the family business is an evolution, it comes out of the total family structure, then it cannot help itself but have quite a few of those features, and some may even say trappings of that structure. Let's listen to some more.
Wife and I sat with Governor Kemp last year for breakfast. And so it's all about those kind of things and what do we want to say and what do we not want to say. And sometimes, people have strong opinions. Like if I said to you, what would you like to say if you could, talk to the governor, you might just unleash, but yet he's our guest, so we have to be, and I try to make them aware of that. If you want to go talk to the governor, there he is, at some other event. And you can probably tell by my tone, it gets to be like, here's what we need to do as the company, and as the father and as the owner and president, this is how we need to interact, and they've done an excellent job and they are great ambassadors for the company. And they were there when they were employees, and how they interacted, and also as adults now, and they're great assets, and they really can be. So I agree with you. I can see where you could see that dichotomy of it can be really bad, but it also can be really good. And I try to take the extra means to talk with them about it, so there's just not an expectation or a disappointment on either side. And by and large, it's worked very well. So I don't know, is that kind of what you were
Oh
thinking
yeah,
of,
certainly,
and there's so
because
many different elements to that.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's the
that's right,
employment
that's right.
element.
There's so many angles to it, you see, and
We invest a significant amount of money back into capital projects because the chemical industry is very capital intensive, to build new projects. But I do that with a balance between what we want to invest in the business and also making sure that we're still meeting our
Now,
long-term
as
financial
my
goals,
guest
my wife and I.
made this point, well, what I'm realizing now is that if I pause and just project myself, then I get that echo out of the screen. So I think we're doing better now. Um, the what my guest is coming to or to speak on is the challenge that is faced when you're talking about family interests in terms of family finances, because you and I know that with family owned businesses, especially small businesses, then in most instances, they are created, they are birthed, they are funded from family resources. And so the decision has to be made, how deep in our personal family finances should we go to fund this business operation? Yes, it is done with the intention that the family will benefit. But at the same time, there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance. Because the last thing that you want to do, because you see, the uniqueness about this is if you invest in arm's length businesses where, as I said, unconnected parties come together, raise funding, and the business tanks, then yes, it's a lost business venture. But when you're talking about taking family resources that have been built over time, over the years, from savings, sweat and toil of past employment, which is meant to secure family future, family presently and in the future, then the decision to take resources and pump into family business, the considerations, the thought process, the variables to be thought through tend to be a little more sensitive, because as you can understand, some family member being more risk averse may say, oh no, I don't want us to commit our funds that we're supposed to be putting aside for retirement into this business venture. Others will say, oh no, I can see the opportunity, and so let's go for it. And that in itself creates a level of dynamic. The dynamics of that interaction is in itself a challenge, which, depending on which way it goes, can end up be giving great results, or it can even court disaster. Let's continue to listen to Seth.
And we have been very, just cut to the chase a little bit. We've been very blessed and fortunate in how that works out. And we've, my wife and I have been married for 39 years, going on 40 years. And we live in the same house we lived in for 30 something years, and so we live a life that's not constantly drawing on a higher demand, and that's very comfortable. And I'll tell you the other principle that we live off of is that we're a debt-free family and a debt-free company. And so, to get there is a huge undertaking, and everybody will point out to you, the world's full of people telling you how you can run your business. But you can go out and borrow all kinds of money. We can do all kinds of crazy things. We could buy a different house, and that's all wonderful until it isn't, right? And then the debt bomb comes home to you. And when you've got that money sitting there and you can weather the storms, that is a great feeling, and it has benefited us over the probably the last 15 years, where we finally just had everything done since starting this business, and then just kind of work within the harvest that we were able to have, and that's it's a very good feeling. It's a great way to operate your business.
Let me pause here for a little while. Another very important point that was made, whereas I was looking earlier on at a decision to be made to take family resources and put into the business, there's also the flip side of the coin. There's a flip side of the coin where, to what extent are you, or is the family going to dip into, extract resources and funds from the business to support a particular lifestyle? So on the one hand, we're talking about how much of family resources should we put at risk, because no matter what you call it, business is a risk. How much of family resources should we put at risk to establish and operate this business? The flip side of the coin is saying, now that the business is up and running and doing pretty well, what are the guardrails? Okay, what are the parameters of operation to ensure that one does not go overboard by depleting this business of its resources in order to maintain a particular lifestyle? And a lot of individuals can identify with this, maybe not from personal experience, but you can identify by seeing it happen. Individuals start their operation, things are going well, and before you know it, they are living a lifestyle, a standard of living, so to speak, that, though yes, desirable, it is really draining the business of its lifeblood, of its resources needed for continuity. So that's another very, very important point that Seth is there making. We go back to Seth.
Is extremely complex with lots of different avenues and lots of pitfalls along the way that I think could make just a series of discussions, papers, research and you do that, but at the same time, the clock is running. So, I mean, I have to make decisions about what to do, how to do it. And I'm implementing my own plan based on what I've learned, and, you can come back in 3 generations and see whether I pulled it off or not. But, that's the challenge. And I think it is to be self-aware, to your point, of where are you in that process? And is it time to, as we say, ring the register, you know what I mean? Cash out, do whatever, because there's so many opportunities to do that if you do it at the right time. And that also can have a lasting legacy for your family. It
Gotcha.
doesn't have to be the business if that's not what they want. And we
Right.
haven't talked about at all about kind of the core values of the business and the business principles. And because I think that runs throughout the whole business for me. And you were generous to say, a person of faith at the beginning. And I think that's where it starts. You have to know and trust, and I build my foundation on a Christian and on Christ.
Mhm.
And so I start with that. And literally, one of the things I always tell people, we know what's carved in stone for your business. I mean, what's really there in stone. And sitting on my desk, and somebody laughed when I first told them about this, is I actually have carved in stone, that I carved myself. And the first thing it says, it has 4 C's. Oh, I had to start with C for some reason. I don't know why. But the first thing is Christ.
Mhm.
And so that permeates the business. And why does that impact our discussion now? Because it's what we said about the legacy and about what we're building and about passing it to your family. If that's not God's will for me, for the company, or for my children, the last thing I want to do is get in the way of that. So I facilitate it. I try to do everything I can do, and then just see as you shake the sifter, what's going to come out of it. All of them are good options, but I
Gotcha.
want my children to go live their God's will wherever it is and whatever business that is. So I can't be upset
This,
with
of
them.
course, is where Seth has been sharing with us is knowledge garnered over years and years and years of experience, we also, the discussion also went on to address the very, very, very important point of succession planning. And what we discussed then is the fact that either small businesses, yes, we're focusing on family owned businesses, but family owned businesses, small businesses tend not to take succession planning very, very seriously. They're aware that it is something that needs to be done. They may have taken cursory action or steps towards having such a plan in place. But the whole question of how ready, how ready is the business, already are the family members, or prepared are they, or prepared is the business for that eventuality? And when I say that eventuality, yes, one would think that after X number of years, I'm going to retire, I'm going to, go off and enjoy my life, etc. And it's all good. It may happen that way. But you and I know that in the course of life, in the course of running a business, unexpected things happen. And so, even from that point of view, succession planning, putting that plan in place that can quickly be activated once an unexpected, you know, or not quite prepared for eventuality should occur, then there's this plan that can jump in. I may have a little clip later down, which I'm going to try to find now to see where Seth was speaking about that succession planning. So I'm going to try to see if I can reach to it. If not, we'll just speak on some very, very salient points having to do with succession planning. So let's see if we can find that little clip closer to the end of our conversation.
On life, see if it makes time, if it makes how you treat people, how we conduct our business,
Mhm.
safety, and that also works in the family, it works in the business, and it's
Mhm.
just the culture that people will want to come into. And so that's I guess
That's it.
if you don't see
Right.
that theme, I would have missed saying it to you because that's what runs through the business
Got you. Got you.
way back. And we all know that, and I think we all face that as we go
Okay.
forward. But I think it's
Not
not
able
able
to
to
zero in
zero in
exactly
exactly
on that segment of the clip, but some very, very important points were made. Very important points were made. since the podcast, I've had, feedback, questions, etc., on this whole issue of succession planning. So it was mentioned then, but this evening I just want to, for the next couple of minutes, just to address some of those in particular for the benefit of our listeners. Now, this whole issue of succession planning, there's no magic to it. There's nothing that is unique and particular about it in relation to family-owned and operated businesses. Okay, it's a generic thing that is applicable and important to just about any business type that you have in operation. The importance of speaking to it in this context is because, unlike other large organizations or whatever, we find that our family-owned businesses tend to not be very proactive. Now, a good succession plan will definitely look at what we call transfer of ownership when the right time comes. Okay, at the heart of it, that's what it's about. It's succession. How do we move along, individuals, and while we move along, we set the pace, we set the tone, so that the business can continue to move on. The other thing about succession planning is most, if not all, family businesses will have as one of its central focus the maintenance of a particular lifestyle of the owners and operators as they transition. So yes, first generation hand over to second generation, maybe even up to third generation. So as the older folks, okay, those individuals that establish the company, move out of the day-to-day humbug, you want to ensure that, okay, your plan is structured in such a way that it facilitates you maintaining a certain lifestyle. Maybe it's a lifestyle that you have become accustomed to, and even then in retirement, as you hand over the baton, you would want to plan properly to be able to maintain that lifestyle. In this whole process of succession, as you move out, others are moving in. So they are the heirs to the legacy, heirs to the dynasty. And so part of that succession planning is to also ensure that these heirs are financially provided for. Remember, I said earlier on that it will not necessarily mean that the younger generations coming up would want to continue to be a part of this business. Maybe not. But as part of the planning, we want to see how best to structure so that they are financially provided for. Another aspect of which I sort of alluded to earlier on is really planning for unexpected events. And that is life. Unexpected events, that is life. Okay, and naturally a part of the fabric of operating a business. So in the family circle, there will be unexpected events, and quite often the family circle depends on this business structure to walk them through these difficult times from a financial point of view. And so you want to have your succession planning incorporating all those components so that everything is in position. So why is it so important then to have this succession plan? There are so many things to consider, but I just thought I'd just make a couple little jotting here and see, because the truth is, as part of your succession planning, as much as it doesn't sound quite like succession, but the intention could be that at the end of this run, we're closing the business. Yeah, we're closing. That could be one of the approach to take, that okay, the younger folks are not showing much of an interest in continuing this business. So let us plan to efficiently bring this business to a close. So there's that aspect of it, okay? Deciding how to exit the business, how to close it down, if that's what you want to decide. You may decide, okay, no, we're not closing it, but we're planning to sell the business. Or something that people do all the time. You decide, okay, let us plan to sell. And so you sort of set yourself a timeline as to how you're going to build up from now through time to the point where you intend to sell. Now, the selling of the business can be done to other family members. It can be done to employees. So, for example, always a family-owned and run business. Quite often, you could have employees who are non-family members, and we know about employees arranging to come together to buy a business when the owners or the originators decide to move on. These people who have been working there for years say, it's a very good business. Let's come together and, as it were, acquire this business. All that is part of the succession. The other thing, as I mentioned, key employees, and then it could be an outright sale to just some external entity, to other persons. Just say, okay, this is a very good business venture. Let us jump on it. Let's jump on it. So this whole planning as to how we activate the exit, very important. The other thing to look at is the whole aspect of valuation. Remember now, you have been operating this business over 10, 15, 20 years. As you approach to that point in time where you may be considering moving it away from you to another, whether it be whatever, to another, then you want to be able to objectively determine what is the value of this business at the point when I am going to effect the transition. What is the value? And that's important. Yeah, because family business or not, once you're passing a business on to another, then the whole question of valuation becomes critical. No, we talk about preparing for the transition. There's no magic number to say you should start to prepare maybe 5 years prior to that date or 3 years. No, but by the nature of your business, by the nature of the internal dynamics of the business, that should help you to derive a reasonable time frame to say, since I intend to, retire, pass on the business, transfer it elsewhere within the next, say, 4 or 5 years, then this is now the time to start to put things in place. So you talk about preparing for the transition. Like anything else, when you craft a plan, you're crafting the plan based on your best knowledge, your best information at a point in time. So even if you have conscientiously worked on and faithfully prepare your exit plan, okay, your succession plan, remember now, you did that based on the information you had at a point in time. So it means, therefore, that your succession plan document is a dynamic document, because as time goes by, you may want to change some things. You may have a certain thought process as to how you would do ABC, but with time you decide, okay, maybe that's not the best thing anymore because conditions change, etc. You may have been earmarking your son Tom to be the one to assume controllership, only to hear Tommy say, no, Pops, I want to go and enjoy and travel. I want to see the world. I don't want to be strapped down into this business, etc. So right away, we're talking about a reworking of the plan. So the plan has to be reviewed regularly reviewed. That is what it is. So we talk about the timeline of your succession. We talk about identifying a successor. It is not good to just have a vague idea as to who or how. No. It is very important to specifically identify who the successor is going to be, because any organization with too many heads is a monster organization. So we need to identify precisely. Yes, there will be others who are functional, who are operational, who are managerial, but there has to be a specific individual identified as the successor. And very key, the process, the step-by-step process towards this transition ought to be articulated and documented so that we have what we call a clear succession path. Okay, now we have what people call SOP, statement of operation. Okay, statement of operation essentially is just a document showing how things are done, a document outlining how processes and activities are carried out. When you were at the helm, you created this company, everything is in your head, things were happening well, and maybe, yes, you got away by just keeping the knowledge in head. No longer so. Once you think of succession, of passing on, then you have to now think about formalizing these procedures and these activities and these undertakings, okay? So you talk about a statement of operation ought to be clearly documented as you prepare for the transition. And we, of course, we mentioned earlier on the valuation of the business. Good. Now, that's about what I want to share with you this afternoon, because I would invite you, of course, to jump on our website and other social media platform where you can access the full podcast. The full podcast you will find to be very interesting and very informative. But I just wanted this afternoon to zero in a little more on this whole succession planning component. A lot more that we could say, a lot more to be said, but as usual, I want this to be a teaser that will get you curious enough and interested enough to go and seek additional information so that you can begin to get your structure and your plan in place. As you know, yes, you may have a good 10-15 years to go by your planning, but hey, unexpected things do happen, and so the succession planning is key. So that's it for now, and thank you very much for joining me. We had a couple little technical glitch, but hey, it is what it is. We got the information across, and so in addition to this past podcast, I invite you to check and listening on others that went on before, where we have quite a bit of interesting and informative matters that we discuss, and not just discuss it in a general theoretical way, but we have been blessed with individuals who are knowledgeable of the subject matter and have shared with us their perspective from having lived it, having experienced it point of view. So thank you again. This is David Etienne from Etienne Strategic Management Consulting, and we're operating here on our podcast platform, which is Crossroads, Navigating Business Challenges, where our focus is to seek out, identify, explore some of these challenges, and much more importantly, to see how best to identify the way, the path to navigate. You cannot eliminate them, but there's a way to work through them as we become better business persons, business people. Once again, David Etienne saying bye for now, and I'll see you next time on our next episode of Crossroads, Navigating Business Challenges. Stay strong.
Go to etnstrategicmc.com. Check out the latest episode of Crossroads, Navigating Business Challenges with David Etienne.